Okay, let's dive into this. Today in our explainer, we are unpacking what is known as the miracle at DXB. It's honestly one of the most unbelievable events in modern aviation history. We're talking about a chilling, totally invisible alignment of weather, human psychology, and machine logic that somehow brought down a massive Boeing 777.
To really grasp the human stakes of this story, I want you to anchor yourself to this number: 6 days. Sitting on this aircraft is a 62-year-old passenger named Mohammed Kadre, just tucked right into seat 45B. In his shirt pocket, a folded Dubai duty-free lottery ticket. For Mohammed, 6 days is exactly how long he has to wait until those numbers are drawn. He is literally 6 days away from winning a cool $1 million jackpot, just sitting there, completely unaware, dreaming about his future.
But what Mohammed absolutely does not know is that simply surviving the next couple of hours is about to become his real jackpot. We start on a textbook-perfect August morning back in 2016. Flight 521 departs India for what really should be a totally routine 3.5-hour hop across the Arabian Sea to Dubai. You've got 282 passengers, 18 crew members, all settled into a seasoned Boeing 777-300. Everything is completely by the book. But this routine flight, it's about to turn into a desperate fight for survival.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the dynamic going on inside the cockpit. We have a 34-year-old Emirati captain and a 37-year-old Australian first officer, Jeremy Webb. Paradoxically, the local captain has only flown 9 recent landings in Dubai over the past year. That's roughly 1 every 6 weeks. His first officer, meanwhile, he's completed 29. So the airport the captain theoretically knows best, his literal home base, is the one he has barely landed at recently.
On top of that, while the captain's incredibly rapid ascent to his seat at just 33 years old is genuinely impressive, his training records hold 2 really critical red flags. First, evaluators notice this tendency to initiate his flare, that maneuver where you raise the nose right before touchdown, just a little bit too early. Second, in a simulator session a year prior, he demonstrated a bit of tunnel vision under high pressure. He'd essentially lock onto a single task and go totally blind to everything else around him. Keep these in the back of your mind, because in just 90 minutes, these 2 buried notes are going to act as a terrifying foreshadowing of the disaster.
So let's look up at the sky over Dubai as the plane approaches. An invisible weather trap is silently setting up directly over runway 12 left. On their descent, the pilots get a standard automated wind shear warning. Wind shear, if you aren't familiar, is just a sudden, violent change in wind speed or direction over a really short distance. Today, 2 massive low-pressure systems are choking the afternoon sea breeze, creating this lethal boundary right on the runway. But honestly, because Dubai issues these wind shear cautions constantly during the summer, the pilots brush it off. To them, it's just routine background noise.
To truly get why wind shear is so incredibly dangerous, we need to pause for a super quick physics check. You see, an airplane's wing doesn't care how fast it's moving over the ground. It literally only cares about how fast the wind is flowing over it. That airspeed is what creates lift. Hit a sudden headwind, your airspeed jumps and the plane lifts up. But if that wind suddenly vanishes or flips into a tailwind, your lift completely evaporates in an instant and the plane drops like a stone. It's stark, undeniable physics.
Now, the Boeing 777 is an absolute marvel. It has this brilliant, predictive wind shear radar system specifically designed to scream danger if a threat is lurking ahead. But here is the fatal flaw on this specific afternoon. The radar needs airborne moisture, like raindrops or a heavy humidity, to bounce its signals off of. And it's Dubai. It is a blazing 48 degrees Celsius in the desert, and the air is bone dry. Because there's no moisture, the one automated safety net built to explicitly warn them stays completely, deadly silent.
And because of that silent radar, Flight 521 is descending as a perfectly functioning aircraft flown by totally unaware pilots, heading straight into a chaotic mess. Just look at this brutal sequence of miscommunications mapping out a literal wall of silence. Minute 1, a 737 ahead of them hits wind shear and reports it, but accidentally broadcasts to the wrong tower frequency so our pilots miss it. Minute 2, an Air India flight aborts its landing, goes around, but says absolutely nothing to air traffic control. A minute after that, another Emirates 777 goes around, and again, absolute silence. Air traffic control essentially leaves Flight 521 utterly blind to the fact that multiple planes right in front of them just failed to land.
Unaware of the danger waiting for them, Flight 521 comes in over the runway threshold. At 40 feet above the runway, which, by the way, is about 10 feet earlier than standard, the captain initiates his flare, pulling the nose up. This directly mirrors those training warnings we talked about earlier. He's flying manually, but the autothrottle is still managing the engine speed. Searing runway thermals push the wings up, the early flare slows their descent, and ground effect creates this massive high-pressure air cushion under the wings.
The plane is now trapped in this bizarre floating zombie state between flying and landing. It's eating up hundreds of meters of runway as the automated engines pull back to idle power, totally assuming the plane is about to touch the concrete.
Right at this exact moment, an incredible 650 meters past the runway threshold, still floating with the engines dead asleep at idle, the aircraft crosses that invisible boundary. They hit the severe wind shear, and a 20-second nightmare officially begins. The plane gets slammed by a massive headwind. That sudden rush of air spikes their airspeed by 12 knots, instantly creating a huge surge of lift, and the massive plane lurches upward. The captain, thinking he just hit a normal thermal, fights it by forcing the nose down.
So, the crucial point is right here. As he forces the nose down, the plane banks slightly, causing the right landing gear to kiss the concrete for just half a second before bouncing back up into the air. Realizing they're way too far down the runway to land safely, the captain calls for a go-around and hits the toga switches, takeoff/go-around, fully expecting those massive engines to roar to life. But they stay silent. Why? The ground mode trap. Because that right gear touched the runway for a fraction of a second, the computer instantly switched from air mode to ground mode logic. This is a feature designed to prevent accidental takeoffs after landing, but here it entirely disabled those toga switches. The engine thrust remained locked at idle. Pressing that button did absolutely nothing.
What follows is a deeply tragic cascade of errors compounding this mechanical trap. As the plane climbs solely on the borrowed momentum of that headwind, the captain's documented tendency for tunnel vision strikes hard. He is terrified of a tail strike, so his eyes lock entirely onto the pitch angle of the nose. This completely blinds him to the unmoving thrust levers resting silently at idle right beneath his palm. Nobody notices the engines are asleep. Compounding the human error even further, they pull the flaps up to 20. Now, while that's standard for a normal go-around, it is entirely wrong for a wind shear escape, and it violently destroys the remaining lift keeping them in the sky. The Boeing 777 peaks at a mere 85 feet in the air. That is terrifyingly low. And at that peak, the borrowed speed bleeds out completely. The vertical speed drops to 0, and then it goes negative. This massive 200-ton aircraft begins falling straight down from the sky. Suddenly feeling that sickening drop in his stomach, the captain finally realizes the trap. He manually shoves those thrust levers all the way forward to the firewall to command full power. But physics is completely unforgiving here. These massive jet engines need about 6 seconds to spool up from idle to full power. Because they're only at 85 feet, the plane only has 3 seconds of altitude left before hitting the ground. The math simply does not work. Just 18 seconds after calling the go-around, the nightmare culminates. The tail of the aircraft slams into runway 12 left at 124 knots. It is a violent, grinding halt. The massive impact completely tears the right engine off the wing. The aircraft slides on its belly, spinning and scraping down the runway amidst a terrifying fire fed instantly by jet fuel. In a matter of seconds, a mechanical failure pivots into a frantic human survival story. And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying gap between safety regulations on paper and human panic in reality. Aviation regulations dictate that an entire aircraft must be evacuated in 90 seconds flat. But the chaotic reality aboard Flight 521? It took an agonizing 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Escape slides blew flat in the heavy wind, the cabin rapidly filled with thick smoke. And yet, panicked passengers literally blocked the narrow aisles. They were incredibly stopping to open overhead bins to grab their luggage while the plane actively burned around them.
Miraculous doesn't even begin to cover it, honestly. Despite all those delays, all 300 passengers and crew managed to escape the burning fuselage right before the center fuel tank completely exploded. And yes, Mohammed Kadre, our lottery ticket holder from earlier, he actually lived to see his incredible $1 million jackpot win 6 days later. But tragically, the blast from that center tank claimed the life of fighter Jassim al-Balushi. He bravely stood his post to the very end to protect those escaping passengers, and he was the only person who did not go home that day. A rigorous 4-year investigation followed this crash, exposing a deeply broken communication chain and directly addressing this automation paradox. It forced some absolutely critical fixes. Air traffic control must now explicitly report all wind shear and go-arounds to following aircraft, no exceptions whatsoever. Boeing updated its procedures to mandate explicit visual verification that thrust levers are actually moving when a go-around is called. And Emirates actively integrated this exact ground mode trap into its recurring simulator training so pilots can recognize it before it's too late. As we rely more and more heavily on invisible, highly complex automated systems to run our modern world, from the aircraft we fly in to the technology sitting in our pockets right now, Flight 521 leaves us with a really chilling question to consider. What happens when our human habits completely blind us to what the machines are actually doing beneath the surface? It's a profound thought to keep in mind the next time we blindly place our trust in the invisible logic of the world around us. Thanks for joining me for today's Explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.